Maria Santos felt her stomach drop as she peered through the helicopter's window at the weathered climbing harness hanging from El Capitan's granite face. After 12 years of searches, there it was, exactly where no one had thought to look. The harness swayed slightly in the rotor wash, its faded blue webbing holding secrets that would shatter everything the climbing world believed about Jake Mitchell's disappearance. What the forensic team would discover clinging to that equipment would transform this case from a tragic accident into something that would send shockwaves through the entire outdoor community. The evidence they found would prove that everything, absolutely everything, about Jake's disappearance had been a lie. But first, let's go back to where it all began, on that perfect July morning when Jake Mitchell started what everyone believed was just another climb. Peak summer at Yosemite National Park brought thousands of climbers from around the world, all drawn to the granite monolith that stood as the ultimate test of skill and endurance. El Capitan rose 3,000 feet above the valley floor, its sheer face catching the morning light like a beacon for the climbing community. The season was at its height in July 2011, with perfect weather conditions and long daylight hours creating ideal circumstances for ambitious ascents. Among the steady stream of climbers preparing for their attempts was Jake Mitchell, a 34-year-old professional climber from Boulder, Colorado, whose reputation preceded him throughout the tight-knit climbing world. His sponsors included major outdoor gear companies like Patagonia and Black Diamond, and his YouTube channel documenting climbing adventures across America had over 2 million subscribers who followed his every move. On the morning of July 15, 2011, Mitchell completed his final equipment check in the parking area below El Capitan, surrounded by fans and fellow climbers eager to witness his latest attempt. His signature red, white, and blue harness gleamed in the morning sun as he methodically inspected every piece of gear, ropes, protection devices, and the specialized equipment needed for his planned speed ascent. His goal was to break his own record on the Dawn Wall, a route that had become synonymous with his name after 3 previous successful climbs. His support team included his longtime climbing partner Tommy Rodriguez and videographer Ashley Cooper, who would document the climb for his popular YouTube series. Weather conditions were absolutely perfect, with crystal-clear skies forecasted for the next 72 hours and virtually no wind. At 6:47 a.m., Mitchell flashed his trademark grin at the cameras and began his ascent, his movements fluid and confident as he disappeared into the morning shadows cast by the massive granite wall. By 2:30 p.m. on July 15, Mitchell should have been clearly visible to his support team at the base, but no one could locate America's climbing hero on the cliff face. His last radio contact had been at 11:15 a.m., when he reported making excellent progress in his characteristic upbeat tone and estimated reaching the Wino Tower section by early afternoon. Rodriguez and Cooper used high-powered binoculars to scan every visible section of the Dawn Wall route, but Mitchell was nowhere to be seen. Other climbing parties on adjacent routes reported no sightings, despite the clear weather providing excellent visibility across the entire face. As afternoon turned to evening, concern escalated to alarm throughout the climbing community gathered at the base. Mitchell had not activated his emergency beacon, and repeated attempts to reach him via radio went unanswered. Fellow climbers began organizing an informal search, with experienced big wall specialists offering to scout different sections of the massive cliff. By sunset, it became devastatingly clear that something had gone seriously wrong with America's most reliable climber. Yosemite Search and Rescue mobilized every available resource at dawn on July 16, deploying their most experienced technical rescue specialists to locate the missing climbing superstar. Team leader Captain Rebecca Torres had overseen dozens of El Capitan rescues during her 15-year career, but this case puzzled her from the start. Elite climbers like Mitchell didn't simply vanish without a trace, especially on well-traveled routes during peak season with perfect weather conditions. The search team used a systematic grid pattern, dividing the Dawn Wall into precise sections and assigning specialized teams to each area. Park Service helicopters provided aerial reconnaissance while ground teams used military-grade telescopes to examine every ledge, crack, and potential resting spot on the massive granite face. Professional climbers from across the country volunteered their expertise, including several who had climbed extensively with Mitchell and knew his techniques intimately. Despite deploying unprecedented resources and searching methodically for 5 full days, the team found absolutely no sign of Mitchell, his distinctive equipment, or any indication of what might have happened during his climb. As days turned into weeks without any trace of Jake Mitchell, the American climbing community and his millions of fans worldwide buzzed with increasingly desperate theories about his disappearance. Some speculated that he might have attempted a secret off-route variation, possibly exploring uncharted territory on the massive cliff face for a surprise video reveal. Others suggested a catastrophic equipment failure, though this seemed impossible given Mitchell's obsessive safety protocols and use of the highest quality American-made gear. The possibility of a sudden medical emergency, such as a stroke or heart attack, was extensively discussed, though Mitchell had recently passed comprehensive medical examinations required by his major sponsors. More disturbing theories began emerging about potential kidnapping or foul play, though investigators found no credible threats against the beloved climber. The National Park Service officially suspended active search operations after 3 weeks, though they continued asking climbers to report any discoveries. Mitchell's family hired the best private investigators money could buy and offered a $500,000 reward for information, but months passed without any credible leads whatsoever. The climbing world struggled to accept that Jake Mitchell might never be found, and his disappearance fundamentally changed the sport in America. His tragic vanishing prompted new safety protocols for professional climbers, with sponsors now requiring sophisticated GPS tracking devices and multiple backup communication systems. The Jake Mitchell Foundation was established by his family and sponsors, funding search and rescue operations and climbing safety research across America's national parks. Tommy Rodriguez, Mitchell's climbing partner and best friend, struggled with overwhelming survivor's guilt and eventually left professional climbing to become a wilderness rescue instructor. Videographer Ashley Cooper compiled her final footage of Mitchell into a memorial documentary that won multiple awards, with all proceeds benefiting mountain rescue organizations. Mitchell's parents held an emotional memorial service 1 year after his disappearance, though they never stopped believing their son might somehow still be alive somewhere. The Dawn Wall itself seemed haunted by his absence, with climbers from around the world making pilgrimages to honor America's lost climbing hero. 12 years later, on August 3, 2023, Yosemite Search and Rescue received what appeared to be a completely routine emergency call that would change everything. 2 German tourists attempting the Dawn Wall had become stranded approximately 2,000 feet up the cliff face when one of them severely injured his ankle during a technical section. Capitan Torres, now a veteran with 27 years of experience and countless El Capitan rescues under her belt, assembled her team for what seemed like a standard technical evacuation. The weather was perfect, the stranded climbers were in clear radio contact, and their position was easily visible from multiple vantage points in the valley below. Rescue specialist David Park prepared the helicopter rigging while technical climber Maria Santos checked the medical equipment they would need for treating the injured tourist. The rescue team had performed identical operations dozens of times over the years, and everyone anticipated completing the straightforward evacuation well before evening. However, as their helicopter approached the Germans' location, Santos spotted something that would unlock the 12-year-old mystery that had haunted American climbing. As the rescue helicopter maneuvered into position near the stranded German climbers, Maria Santos noticed something that made her blood run cold. Approximately 50 feet to the right of the tourist's position, partially concealed by a small granite overhang, she spotted what was unmistakably climbing equipment still attached to the rock face. The gear looked severely weathered and ancient, definitely not belonging to any recent climbing party or the Germans they were rescuing. Santos immediately radioed her shocking observation to Captain Torres, who felt her heart skip a beat as she directed the pilot to move closer for a better view. Through high-powered binoculars, the entire rescue team could clearly see a faded blue harness still clipped to protection anchored securely in the rock, along with what appeared to be deteriorated ropes and other climbing hardware. The equipment showed obvious signs of over a decade of exposure to Sierra Nevada weather, with sun-bleached colors and significant deterioration that could only come from years of harsh conditions. Torres felt a chill of recognition wash over her as she realized they might have finally found evidence related to Jake Mitchell's mysterious disappearance that had haunted her entire career. Captain Torres faced an agonizing professional decision: complete the immediate rescue of the injured German climbers first, or investigate what might be the most important discovery in Yosemite's search and rescue history. Following established emergency protocols, she made the difficult choice to prioritize the active rescue while ensuring that Santos meticulously documented the mysterious equipment's exact location using military-grade GPS coordinates and high-resolution photographs. The German rescue proceeded flawlessly, with both tourists successfully evacuated within 90 minutes of the initial call. Throughout the operation, Santos managed to maneuver close enough to confirm that the weathered equipment appeared consistent with high-end American climbing gear used in 2011, including rope specifications and hardware types that perfectly matched Jake Mitchell's known preferences and sponsor relationships. The harness bore the distinctive blue and red color scheme of Mitchell's signature gear, though 12 years of weather had faded the once vibrant colors. Once both German climbers were safely on solid ground and the injured party was en route to medical facilities, Torres immediately contacted Park headquarters to report the potentially game-changing discovery that could finally solve America's greatest climbing mystery. Park Service officials moved with unprecedented speed to assemble an elite investigation team, including the FBI's best forensic specialists, climbing experts, and several members from the original 2011 search operation who had never forgotten Jake Mitchell. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, a forensic anthropologist with extensive experience in wilderness recovery operations and cold case investigations, was flown in from Washington, D.C. to lead the technical analysis. The team also included Tommy Rodriguez, Mitchell's former climbing partner, who reluctantly agreed to participate despite his retirement from the climbing world. Rodriguez's intimate knowledge of Mitchell's equipment preferences, climbing style, and personal habits would prove invaluable in determining whether the gear actually belonged to his missing best friend. Advanced photogrammetry equipment was deployed to create detailed three-dimensional models of the equipment's position without disturbing what might be a crucial crime scene. The team used specialized forensic cameras capable of capturing microscopic details from safe distances, allowing for thorough documentation before any physical recovery attempts. Weather forecasts were carefully monitored to ensure optimal conditions for the delicate operation, as the equipment's precarious position made access challenging even for the most experienced technical rescue specialists. The recovery operation began at dawn on August 5, with Maria Santos and David Park leading the technically complex approach to reach the equipment's location on the cliff face. Using the most advanced rigging techniques available to modern rescue operations, they established multiple secure anchor points that allowed for careful examination and documentation of each piece of potentially crucial evidence. The harness was indeed severely weathered but remarkably well preserved due to its protected position under the small granite overhang that had shielded it from the worst Sierra Nevada weather for over a decade. Santos immediately noticed manufacturer markings and model numbers that perfectly matched brands Jake Mitchell was known to use exclusively, and the harness size appeared exactly consistent with his documented physical dimensions. The ropes showed extensive UV damage and significant fraying from 12 years of exposure, but most importantly, they remained securely attached to properly placed protection devices in the solid granite. Dr. Hayes supervised the painstakingly careful removal of each item, ensuring proper chain of custody procedures that would be essential if this became criminal evidence. The team also discovered a partially filled water bottle wedged behind a flake of rock, its contents long since evaporated, but the container itself providing another potentially vital piece of the puzzle. As Dr. Hayes and her forensic team examined the recovered equipment under controlled laboratory conditions, they made discoveries that completely shattered every theory about Jake Mitchell's disappearance and sent shockwaves through the investigation. The climbing gear showed absolutely no signs of catastrophic failure that would suggest any kind of equipment-related accident. Most disturbing of all, the ropes had been deliberately cut with a sharp blade, not torn or damaged through normal climbing stress, weather exposure, or any kind of accident. The cuts were clean and intentional, made by someone with knowledge of climbing systems and deliberate malicious intent. Forensic examination revealed traces of human blood on Mitchell's distinctive harness webbing, along with what appeared to be defensive wound patterns where someone had clearly struggled violently. Dr. Hayes discovered fabric fibers embedded in the gear that didn't match any of Mitchell's known clothing or equipment, strongly suggesting physical contact with another person during his final moments. Most shocking of all, the water bottle contained clear fingerprints, and preliminary analysis indicated they belonged to someone other than Jake Mitchell. These horrifying findings completely transformed the investigation from a climbing accident into what appeared to be a deliberate homicide case. FBI investigators officially joined the case as it transitioned from a missing person inquiry to a potential murder investigation that would rock the American outdoor recreation community. Agent Lisa Crawford, a specialist in cold cases involving outdoor activities and violent crime in national parks, began comprehensively reviewing all evidence from the original 2011 search with fresh eyes and modern investigative techniques. The physical evidence recovered from El Capitan's cliff face underwent the most sophisticated forensic analysis available, including advanced DNA testing, enhanced fingerprint analysis, and detailed materials examination using cutting-edge laboratory equipment. Investigators methodically re-interviewed everyone who had been at El Capitan during Mitchell's disappearance, using the new physical evidence to ask much more targeted and specific questions about potential suspects and motives. Several witnesses came forward with information they hadn't previously considered significant, including disturbing reports of an unfamiliar and aggressive climber who had been asking detailed questions about Mitchell's climbing plans and daily routines. Security footage from park entrances was digitally enhanced using modern artificial intelligence technology, revealing much clearer images of vehicles and individuals present during the critical time period when America's climbing hero vanished forever. 8 months after the equipment discovery, investigators achieved a major breakthrough when advanced DNA analysis identified genetic material from someone other than Jake Mitchell on the harness webbing and water bottle. The DNA profile matched samples in the National Criminal Database to Vincent "Vinny" Kowalski, a 38-year-old former Army Ranger and competitive climber with a documented history of violent confrontations and jealousy toward successful climbers. Kowalski had been present at Yosemite during Mitchell's disappearance, staying at a nearby campground, though he had somehow never been questioned during the original investigation despite several witness reports of his aggressive behavior. When FBI agents confronted him with the overwhelming DNA evidence at his home in Nevada, Kowalski initially maintained his innocence but eventually broke down and confessed to a shocking crime motivated by pure jealousy and resentment. According to his detailed statement, he had deliberately followed Mitchell up the Dawn Wall route and confronted him about what he perceived as unfair advantages in the climbing industry. The argument escalated into deadly violence when Kowalski attacked Mitchell in a rage, ultimately causing him to fall to his death in a remote area where the body was never recovered. Kowalski then cut Mitchell's ropes to make it appear like an equipment failure and fled the scene. FBI agents moved swiftly once Vincent Kowalski's DNA was confirmed, conducting surveillance to gather additional evidence before making their move. Agent Crawford coordinated with local Nevada law enforcement to apprehend Kowalski at his Las Vegas apartment, where he worked as a freelance climbing instructor for wealthy tourists. The arrest occurred at dawn on March 15, 2024, with Kowalski initially showing no surprise when federal agents knocked on his door. He had been living under the weight of his crime for over 12 years, and some part of him seemed almost relieved that the secret was finally out. During the arrest, investigators discovered a disturbing shrine in Kowalski's bedroom dedicated to Jake Mitchell, filled with newspaper clippings about the disappearance, printed social media posts, and even merchandise from Mitchell's sponsors. Most chilling was a journal where Kowalski had obsessively detailed his growing resentment toward Mitchell's success, documenting every sponsorship deal, every magazine feature, and every YouTube milestone with increasing bitterness. The journal entries revealed a man consumed by jealousy who had been planning some form of confrontation for months before Mitchell's final climb. Under intense FBI interrogation, Vincent Kowalski's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled after 14 hours of questioning spread across 3 days. Agent Crawford used advanced psychological techniques, presenting the overwhelming DNA evidence while allowing Kowalski to maintain some sense of control over his narrative. The breakthrough came when investigators showed him crime scene photos of Mitchell's recovered equipment, causing Kowalski to break down completely and confess to the premeditated murder. According to his detailed statement, Kowalski had spent weeks studying Mitchell's climbing patterns and social media posts to determine the perfect opportunity for a confrontation. He had followed Mitchell up the Dawn Wall route that fateful morning, carrying a concealed knife and planning to humble America's climbing hero by sabotaging his equipment. When Mitchell discovered Kowalski's presence and confronted him about following so closely, the argument escalated rapidly. Kowalski admitted to attacking Mitchell in a rage, stabbing him multiple times before cutting his ropes and pushing him off the cliff face into an area where the body would never be recovered. News of Vincent Kowalski's arrest and confession sent shockwaves through the climbing community and captured national media attention across America. Major networks interrupted regular programming to report the breaking news that Jake Mitchell's mysterious disappearance had finally been solved after 12 long years. Social media exploded with reactions from Mitchell's millions of followers, fellow climbers, and outdoor enthusiasts who had followed the case since 2011. Tommy Rodriguez was thrust back into the spotlight he had tried so hard to avoid, forced to relive his best friend's disappearance as reporters camped outside his home demanding interviews. Mitchell's family held their first press conference in over a decade, with his parents thanking law enforcement while expressing their complex emotions about finally learning the truth. The climbing industry faced uncomfortable questions about toxic competition and jealousy within the community, with several professional climbers coming forward to share their own experiences with stalking and threats from obsessed competitors. Outdoor gear companies began re-evaluating their sponsorship practices and social media strategies to prevent creating the kind of public profile that had made Mitchell a target. The prosecution team, led by federal prosecutor Amanda Walsh, began building what they considered an airtight murder case against Vincent Kowalski. The evidence was overwhelming: DNA proof, a detailed confession, journal entries showing premeditation, and physical evidence from the crime scene that corroborated Kowalski's account of the murder. However, the defense team, headed by prominent criminal attorney Marcus Bloomberg, began developing a strategy focused on mental health issues and temporary insanity. Bloomberg argued that 12 years of obsession and jealousy had created a psychological break that made Kowalski legally incapable of understanding his actions. The defense requested extensive psychological evaluations and began building a case around Kowalski's documented history of military combat trauma and adjustment disorders following his Army service. Jury selection became a complex process, as finding impartial jurors proved challenging given the extensive media coverage and Mitchell's beloved status in American culture. The judge ordered a change of venue from Nevada to Colorado, reasoning that a more diverse jury pool would be available in Denver. Both legal teams prepared for what promised to be one of the most closely watched murder trials in recent outdoor recreation history. The trial of Vincent Kowalski began on September 8, 2024, in a Denver federal courthouse packed with media representatives, climbing community members, and Mitchell's family and friends. Judge Patricia Morrison presided over the proceedings with strict media guidelines, allowing cameras in the courtroom but prohibiting any recording during victim impact statements. Prosecutor Walsh opened with a devastating presentation of the physical evidence, using large-screen displays to show the jury crime scene photos, DNA analysis results, and excerpts from Kowalski's obsessive journal entries. The prosecution painted a clear picture of premeditated murder motivated by jealousy and resentment toward Mitchell's success and popularity. Defense attorney Bloomberg countered with an emotional opening statement about his client's mental health struggles, combat trauma, and the psychological pressures created by social media culture in the climbing world. He argued that Kowalski's actions, while inexcusable, were the result of a severe psychological break rather than calculated murder. The courtroom atmosphere was tense as both sides prepared to present their cases to a jury that would decide whether America's climbing hero had been the victim of cold-blooded murder or a tragic psychological breakdown. The prosecution's case was built around a parade of compelling witnesses who painted a comprehensive picture of both Jake Mitchell's character and Vincent Kowalski's growing obsession. Tommy Rodriguez delivered heart-wrenching testimony about his friendship with Mitchell, describing him as generous, kind, and always willing to help other climbers regardless of their skill level. Fellow professional climbers testified about Mitchell's positive impact on the sport and his role as an ambassador for outdoor recreation. Dr. Jennifer Hayes presented the forensic evidence with scientific precision, explaining how DNA analysis and blood spatter patterns proved that Mitchell had been murdered rather than dying in a climbing accident. The prosecution also called several climbers who had witnessed Kowalski's increasingly erratic behavior in the months leading up to Mitchell's disappearance, including incidents of verbal confrontations and inappropriate questions about Mitchell's personal life and climbing schedule. Park rangers testified about the extensive search operations and how the equipment's location proved that Mitchell had been deliberately targeted at a specific point on the route. Each witness added another layer to the prosecution's argument that this was a carefully planned murder, not a spontaneous act of violence. Defense attorney Bloomberg presented a dramatically different narrative, focusing on Vincent Kowalski's psychological state and military background to explain his actions. Military psychiatrists testified about Kowalski's combat service in Afghanistan and the long-term effects of post-traumatic stress disorder on his judgment and impulse control. The defense argued that social media culture and the climbing industry's emphasis on competition and celebrity status had created an environment that triggered Kowalski's existing psychological vulnerabilities. Several mental health experts explained how obsessive behaviors could escalate into violence when combined with untreated trauma and feelings of inadequacy. Bloomberg presented Kowalski's journal entries not as evidence of premeditation, but as symptoms of a deteriorating mental state that culminated in a psychotic break on El Capitan. The defense also called witnesses who testified about Kowalski's positive contributions to the climbing community before his breakdown, including his work with disabled veterans learning adaptive climbing techniques. However, the prosecution's cross-examination revealed inconsistencies in the defense's timeline and challenged the claim that Kowalski was incapable of understanding his actions during the murder. After 6 days of deliberation, the jury returned to the packed Denver courthouse with their verdict on Vincent Kowalski's fate. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as Mitchell's family held hands in the front row, while Kowalski showed no emotion as he stood to hear the decision that would determine the rest of his life. The jury foreman announced guilty verdicts on all charges: first-degree murder, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of relief and emotion as Mitchell's mother broke down crying, finally hearing the justice they had sought for over 13 years. Kowalski's shoulders sagged as the reality of his conviction set in, while his defense team immediately began planning their appeal strategy. Judge Morrison scheduled sentencing for the following month, though federal guidelines virtually guaranteed a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Outside the courthouse, Prosecutor Walsh addressed the media, emphasizing that the verdict brought justice not only for Jake Mitchell but also for the entire climbing community that had been shaken by his senseless murder. The jury later revealed that Kowalski's detailed confession and the overwhelming physical evidence made their decision clear, despite some sympathy for his mental health struggles. Judge Patricia Morrison sentenced Vincent Kowalski to life in prison without the possibility of parole during an emotional hearing that brought final closure to Jake Mitchell's family. Mitchell's parents delivered powerful victim impact statements, describing how 13 years of not knowing their son's fate had devastated their lives and relationships. His mother spoke directly to Kowalski, telling him that while they could never forgive his actions, they hoped he would find peace and perhaps help other veterans struggling with similar mental health issues. Tommy Rodriguez also addressed the court, explaining how survivor's guilt had nearly destroyed his own life and expressing hope that the truth would finally allow him to heal. Kowalski offered a brief apology, acknowledging that no words could undo his actions but expressing genuine remorse for the pain he had caused. The climbing community began implementing new safety measures and support systems for professional athletes dealing with competition pressure and public scrutiny. Major outdoor brands announced funding for mental health resources and conflict resolution programs within the climbing community. The case also prompted discussions about social media's role in creating unhealthy obsessions and the responsibility of public figures to protect themselves from potentially dangerous fans. 5 years after Vincent Kowalski's conviction, the climbing community had transformed Jake Mitchell's tragic death into a powerful force for positive change throughout American outdoor recreation. The Jake Mitchell Foundation had grown into a major organization providing mental health resources, safety education, and conflict resolution training for climbers nationwide. His memorial at the base of El Capitan had become a pilgrimage site where climbers from around the world paid their respects and renewed their commitment to the values Mitchell had embodied. Tommy Rodriguez returned to professional climbing with a focus on mentoring young athletes and promoting mental health awareness, using his platform to ensure that Mitchell's legacy lived on. The Dawn Wall route itself was officially renamed the Jake Mitchell Memorial Route, with proceeds from climbing permits supporting search and rescue operations throughout America's national parks. Mitchell's YouTube channel, maintained by his family, continued to inspire new generations of climbers while serving as an educational resource about climbing safety and ethics. The case had exposed the dark side of competition and social media obsession in outdoor sports, leading to industry-wide changes in how professional athletes were protected and supported. Most importantly, Jake Mitchell's story became a powerful reminder that even in the pursuit of extreme adventures, human kindness and community support remained the most important elements of any climbing partnership. The shocking discovery that began with a routine rescue operation had not only brought justice to America's climbing hero but had also created a lasting legacy that would protect future generations of adventurers for decades to come. Before you go, you just witnessed how a single routine rescue mission solved America's greatest climbing mystery after 12 long years. Jake Mitchell's family waited over a decade for answers, and his killer almost got away with the perfect crime. Stories like this, real mysteries with shocking twists that change everything we thought we knew, don't just happen every day. But here's the thing, YouTube's algorithm decides who gets to see these incredible true stories. Right now, there are thousands of people scrolling past this video who would be absolutely captivated by Jake's story, just like you were. They deserve to know what really happened on El Capitan that day. They deserve to see justice served. If this story gave you chills, if it made you think twice about what really happens in our national parks, If you found yourself holding your breath during that final revelation, then Jake's story deserves your like. It's literally just one click, but it tells YouTube that real stories matter more than mindless content. And if you want to hear more mysteries that will keep you up at night, cases that took decades to solve, disappearances that stumped entire communities until one shocking piece of evidence changed everything, then subscribing takes 2 seconds but ensures you never miss another story like Jake's. Don't let Jake Mitchell's story disappear into YouTube's algorithm the same way he disappeared on that cliff face. The difference is, this time, you have the power to make sure his story reaches the people who need to hear it. Hit that like button. Subscribe. And let's make sure these incredible true stories get the attention they deserve. Because somewhere out there, another family is waiting for answers. Another mystery is waiting to be solved. And you might just be the person who helps it reach the right audience.